Commander Park Jiho stood at the observation deck of New Seoul Station, watching the morning light from the system's twin suns paint the metal walls gold. The station was home to 50,000 people, most of them families who had come here to start new lives far from Earth. Children played in the corridors, their laughter echoing through the halls. Old people sat in the gardens, sharing stories of worlds they had left behind. Park liked the quiet mornings best. In 2 hours, the station would be busy with work and school and all the noise of daily life. But right now, everything was peaceful. He could hear the soft hum of the life support systems and the distant sound of children getting ready for their special day. Today was Foundation Day at the Hope Children's Center. 200 children who had lost their families in various wars across human space would celebrate their new home and their new futures. Dr. Kim Nari had been planning this day for months. She wanted it to be perfect for the kids. Park smiled, thinking about Dr. Kim. She was a small woman with gentle hands and a voice that could calm any frightened child. She had come to New Seoul Station 3 years ago after her own family died in a pirate attack. Instead of running away from pain, she had decided to help other children who knew the same hurt. The orphanage took up an entire section of the station. It had classrooms, play areas, gardens, and even a small theater where the children put on shows. Dr. Kim had fought hard to get funding for everything. She said children needed beauty and hope, not just food and shelter. Park's communication device buzzed. It was Choi Minji from the communications center. "Commander, we're getting some strange readings on the long-range sensors," she said. Her voice sounded worried. "What kind of readings?" Park asked. "Ships, sir. Big ones. They're still far out, but they're heading our way. The computer can't identify them." Park felt a cold feeling in his stomach. New Seoul Station was on the edge of human space, far from any military protection. They had only a small defense force and a few old patrol ships. "Keep monitoring them," he said. "Let me know if they get closer." In the Hope Children's Center, Lee Dong-hyun was putting the final touches on his presentation. At 12 years old, he was one of the older children in the orphanage. The younger kids looked up to him, and he took that responsibility seriously. His presentation was about Earth's history. He had spent weeks learning about the old planet where humans first came from. He wanted to show the little ones that humans had always been survivors, always found ways to keep going, even when things were bad. "Dong-hyun, breakfast time," called one of the teachers. He saved his work and ran to the dining hall. 200 children sat at long tables eating and talking excitedly about the day ahead. Some were as young as 5, others were teenagers like him. They came from dozens of different worlds, but here they were all family. Dr. Kim stood at the front of the room, smiling at the happy chaos. She clapped her hands twice, and the children quickly became quiet. "Today is our special day," she said. "Today we remember that even when we lose our first families, we can always build new ones. Today we celebrate hope." The children cheered and clapped. Dong-hyun felt warm inside. He had been at the orphanage for 2 years, ever since his parents died in a mining accident. Dr. Kim had become like a mother to all of them. Back on the command deck, Park was getting more worried. The unknown ships were getting closer, and they were big. Really big. His sensors showed at least 20 vessels, some of them the size of battleships. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," Minji said. "Put it through." The main screen flickered, and a face appeared that made Park's blood turn cold. It was an alien, but not like any he had seen before. The creature had gray skin, black eyes, and sharp teeth. When it spoke, its voice was like metal scraping against stone. "This is War Master Thokran of the Valkyrie 3rd Fleet," the alien said. "Your presence pollutes this sector. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally or be destroyed." Park had heard of the Valkyrie Empire. They were a militant race that had been expanding through this part of space for the past few years. They believed that only the strong deserved to live, and they thought humans were weak because they cared about civilians and children. "This is Commander Park of New Seoul Station," he replied. "We are a civilian facility with families and children. We pose no threat to you." The alien's face twisted into what might have been a smile. "Children are weakness. Families are weakness. You will surrender or die." The transmission ended. Park immediately activated the station's emergency protocols. Alarms began to sound throughout the facility. He opened a channel to all sections. "Attention all residents, this is not a drill. We are under threat from hostile forces. Please report to your assigned emergency stations immediately." In the orphanage, Dr. Kim heard the alarms and felt her heart sink. She had hoped they would be safe out here, far from the wars that had already taken so much from these children. "Everyone, stay calm," she told the kids. "Remember what we practiced. We're going to go to the safe rooms now." But even as she spoke, she could see the fear in their eyes. These children had already lost everything once. Now it was happening again. Dong-yun helped the younger children line up. He tried to look brave, but inside he was scared too. Through the large windows of the dining hall, he could see ships appearing in space around the station. They were black and covered in spikes like metal monsters. "Dr. Kim," he said quietly, "will we be okay?" She put her hand on his shoulder. "We'll do everything we can, sweetheart." On the command deck, Park was trying to contact Earth for help, but it would take days for any military ships to reach them. He looked at the tactical display and felt sick. The Valkyrie had surrounded the station completely. "Sir, they're charging weapons," reported his tactical officer. Park opened a channel to the Valkyrie fleet. "War Master Thokran, we are evacuating our civilians. Please allow us time to get the children to safety." The alien's laughter was like breaking glass. "There is no safety for the weak. You will learn what strength means." The first shots hit the station's outer hull. The lights flickered, and Park could feel the floor shake under his feet. But these weren't aimed at military targets. The Valkyrie were deliberately hitting the civilian sections. In the orphanage, the children huddled in the reinforced safe rooms while explosions echoed through the walls. Dr. Kim held the smallest ones, singing softly to keep them calm. But she could see the growing fear in all their faces. "Why are they attacking us?" asked a little girl named Yoonji. "We didn't do anything bad." Dr. Kim didn't have an answer. She just held the child closer. The attack continued for 20 minutes. Park watched helplessly as section after section of his station was damaged. The Valkyrie weren't trying to capture anything. They were trying to cause as much pain as possible. Then his worst nightmare came true. The sensors showed Valkyrie soldiers boarding the station. They were cutting through the hull in multiple places, heading straight for the civilian areas. "All security teams protect the evacuation routes," Park ordered. But he knew they didn't have enough people to stop a full invasion. In the orphanage, they could hear the sound of metal being cut and torn. Strange voices echoed in the corridors outside, speaking in harsh alien words. "Stay quiet," Dr. Kim whispered to the children. "Whatever happens, stay together." The safe room door exploded. Inward, 3 Valkyrie soldiers stood in the doorway, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. They looked at the terrified children and showed their sharp teeth. "Found them," one said in broken human language. "The weak ones." Dr. Kim stepped in front of the children. "Please, they're just babies. They can't hurt anyone." The lead soldier pointed his weapon at her. "Weakness must be removed." The energy blast threw her against the wall. The children screamed. Dong-hyun grabbed little Yoonji and tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. More soldiers were coming, through the hole in the wall. He activated his communication device with shaking fingers. "Commander Park," he said, his voice breaking with fear. "They're coming through the walls. Tell my sister on Mars I love—" The transmission cut to static as the second blast hit. Park stared at the silent communication device in his hand. Around him, his officers stood in shocked silence. The tactical display showed the orphanage section. Going dark, 200 children. Gone. The Valkyrie ships began to pull away from the station. Their message was clear. This was what happened to humans who dared to exist in their space. But as War Master Thokran looked at the smoking ruin of New Sol Station, he made a mistake. He thought he had shown humans their weakness. He had no idea he had just awakened something that would make the galaxy tremble. The news reached Earth in 6 hours. President Han Ji-woo was having breakfast with her family when her emergency communicator started beeping. She answered it expecting another trade dispute or diplomatic problem. Instead, She heard words that would change everything. Madam President, New Seoul Station has been attacked. The casualties are extensive. How extensive? She asked, already standing up. 200 children, ma'am. All dead. The orphanage was deliberately targeted. Han felt the world stop spinning. She had visited that orphanage last year during her tour of the outer colonies. She remembered the children's choir singing for her, their bright faces full of hope and dreams. Get me the full report now. Within an hour, the images were broadcasting across human space. The twisted metal that had once been the Hope Children's Center, the Children's Foundation Day decorations, floating in the vacuum of space. Commander, Park's broken voice describing how the Valkyrie soldiers had hunted individual children through the corridors. The reaction was immediate, and unlike anything in human history. On Mars, factory workers stopped their machines and stood in silent rage. On Luna, the normally busy trading posts fell completely quiet. On colony worlds scattered across the galaxy, humans gathered around public screens and wept openly. But it wasn't just sadness. Something darker was growing. Captain Seo Jabum was on leave on Earth when he saw the broadcast. He had survived 3 previous Valkyrie attacks on human shipping convoys. He had seen what these creatures could do. But this was different. This was deliberate murder of innocents. He canceled his leave and reported to Fleet Command immediately. Sir, requesting immediate assignment to any mission against the Valkyrie, he told Admiral Yang Sunho. There is no mission yet, Captain, Yang replied. But even as he said it, he knew that was about to change. By the end of the first day, over 2 million humans had volunteered for military service. The recruitment centers couldn't process them fast enough. People were camping outside, demanding to join the fight. Dr. Yoon Tae-hyung was working late in his laboratory when the emergency call came. As the military's head of advanced research, he had been developing new technologies for years, but most of them had been deemed too dangerous for actual use. Doctor, this is President Han. I need you to open the Prometheus files. Yoon felt his hands shake. Protocol Prometheus contained humanity's most terrible weapons. Things that had been built but never deployed because they violated every rule of civilized warfare. Ma'am, are you certain some of these technologies? Doctor, they murdered children. All rules are off. The Earth Federation Council held an emergency session that lasted 18 hours. Representatives from every human world attended, either in person or by quantum communication. The debate was not about whether to respond. It was about how far they were willing to go. Commander Park was brought to Earth to testify. His appearance shocked everyone. The confident officer they remembered had become a hollow-eyed man who spoke in whispers. But when he described what he had seen on the security recordings, his voice grew strong with anger. They didn't just kill them quickly, he told the council. The orbital scans showed Valkyrie soldiers pursuing individual children through the station corridors for over an hour. They were playing with them, hunting them for sport. The chamber fell completely silent. This wasn't war, Park continued. This was torture. This was evil. General Ko Hyun-woo stood up. He was the oldest member of the Earth Defense Force, a veteran of a dozen conflicts. His voice carried the weight of authority. I have served for 40 years, he said. I have always followed the rules of war. I have always protected civilians, respected prisoners, limited collateral damage, but there are no rules for dealing with child killers. President Han called for a vote on Resolution 2847, the absolute war authorization. It passed unanimously. The resolution was unlike anything in human law. It suspended all limitations on weapons development and deployment. It authorized military commanders to use any means necessary. It declared that the Valkyrie Empire had forfeited any right to mercy or quarter. But the most important part was a single sentence. The protection of human children is the highest priority of our species, and any threat to them will be met with total response. Admiral Yang was given command of the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Ships were pulled from every corner of human space. New vessels rolled out of shipyards that had been working around the clock since the attack. But it wasn't just about numbers. In secret facilities across human space, Dr. Yoon's teams were working on weapons that would have been unthinkable just days before. The quantum dissolution bombs that could unmake matter at the molecular level. The neural feedback systems that could drive entire alien crews insane. The atmospheric processors that could transform alien worlds into human colonies in weeks instead of decades. Lieutenant Song Hyun was assigned to the new Psychological Warfare Division. Her job was to make sure the galaxy understood what happened when you crossed humanity's red lines. She designed the broadcasts that would go out before each human attack. Images of the murdered children, their names and ages, their dreams that would never come true. The message was simple and terrifying. This is what you killed. This is why we're coming for you. 3 months after New Sol Station, the first human response fleet reached Valkyrie space. The aliens expected a normal military engagement. They had no idea what was coming. The human ships didn't announce themselves. They didn't demand surrender. They simply began erasing Valkyrie installations from existence. War Master Thokrin watched the first human attack from his command ship. He had expected the humans to be angry, but this was something else entirely. These weren't the careful, limited strikes that humans usually made. These were attacks designed to cause maximum terror. When the humans hit the military base on Korthak Prime, they didn't just destroy it. They made it disappear completely, leaving a perfectly smooth crater where an entire fortress complex had stood moments before. No debris, no wreckage, just empty space. What kind of weapon does that? His tactical officer asked. Thokrin had no answer. In 40 years of warfare, he had never seen anything like it. The human fleet moved through Valkyrie space like a plague. They hit 12 military installations in 3 days, and each attack was more devastating than the last. But the worst part wasn't the destruction, it was the silence. The humans weren't talking, they weren't making demands or offering terms. They were just killing. Colonel Bae Minho led the special operations teams that struck Valkyrie command centers. His soldiers moved like ghosts, appearing in the most secure facilities without warning. They didn't capture enemy commanders. They made them vanish. Valkyrie leaders would simply disappear from their offices, leaving behind only recordings of their final moments. The security cameras showed black-armored humans dragging them into the shadows, and then nothing. The psychological effect was devastating. The Valkyrie military, which had ruled through fear for generations, suddenly found themselves terrified of shadows. On Earth, tech specialist John Woo-jin was developing AI systems that could predict Valkyrie tactical responses with frightening accuracy. The human fleets began arriving at enemy positions before the Valkyrie had even finished planning their strategies. How are they doing this? Thokrin demanded of his intelligence officers. How do they know where we'll be? We don't know, sir. It's like they can read our thoughts. The Valkyrie Empire, which had conquered 30 star systems in the past decade, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. But the humans weren't done. Captain Seo, now leading the elite orphan squadron, piloted fighters that carried the names of every child killed at New Sol Station. His ship was called Lee Dongyun's Vengeance, and he flew it with a cold precision that terrified even his own wingmen. The Valkyrie began sending desperate messages to other alien powers. The humans have gone insane, they said. They fight like machines, but with the fury of wild animals. They are not the weak species we believed them to be. But no one answered. The galaxy was watching humanity's response with a mixture of horror and fascination. Some alien governments quietly began reviewing their own policies toward human civilians. After 6 months of constant defeat, the Valkyrie High Command finally understood their mistake. They had thought humans were weak because they protected their children. Now they realized the opposite was true. Humans were terrifying precisely because they protected their children, and when those children were threatened, there was no limit to how far humans would go for revenge. War Master Thokrin, who had ordered the attack on New Sol Station, sat in his command chamber surrounded by reports of defeat. 50 Valkyrie worlds had fallen to human forces. Military installations across the Empire had been erased from existence. His best commanders had vanished into the night, and the humans weren't slowing down. If anything, they were accelerating. He finally understood what his intelligence officers had been trying to tell him. Humanity hadn't sent their entire military to fight the Valkyrie. They had sent less than half of their available forces. The where that was destroying his empire, was being treated by humans as a minor police action. The realization filled him with a fear he had never known before. Dr. Lim Soo-young stood in the underground laboratory beneath Geneva, watching her latest creation take shape. The quantum dissolution weapon looked harmless enough, a silver cylinder no bigger than a coffee cup, but inside that innocent shell was technology that could unmake matter itself. "Are you sure about this, Doctor?" asked her assistant. "Once we deploy these weapons, there's no going back." Lim thought about the videos she had seen from New Seoul Station, children's toys floating in space where a nursery used to be. "They crossed the line first," she said quietly. "Now they get to learn what happens when you make humans angry." 6 months had passed since the massacre. In that time, humanity had transformed from a peaceful collection of colonies into something the galaxy had never seen before. The arsenal of democracy that had once defeated fascism on Earth was now building weapons that made nuclear bombs look like firecrackers. The first Valkyrie world to face Dr. Lim's new weapons was Korthak Prime. It was a military stronghold with underground bunkers that the aliens thought were impregnable. The human fleet arrived without warning and deployed a single dissolution bomb. Admiral Choi Yunbin watched from her command ship as the weapon activated. There was no explosion, no flash of light. The Valkyrie fortress simply stopped existing. Where a massive underground complex had been moments before, there was now a perfectly spherical hole in the planet's crust, smooth as glass. "Target eliminated," her tactical officer reported in a voice that didn't quite hide his shock. "Move to the next target," Choi ordered. She had 12 more military installations to destroy before lunch. The Valkyrie defenders tried to fight back, but their weapons couldn't even scratch the human ships. Dr. Yoon's research teams had developed energy shields that made Valkyrie plasma cannons completely useless. The human fleet moved through enemy fire as if it didn't exist. On the ground, Colonel Bae Minho's special forces were conducting a different kind of warfare. They didn't fight Valkyrie soldiers. They hunted Valkyrie commanders. Bae's teams had perfected the art of invisible warfare. They could infiltrate any Valkyrie facility, no matter how well defended. Their black armor was equipped with technology that bent light around them, making them literally invisible to most sensors. General Varuk, the Valkyrie commander of the Outer Defense Zone, was reviewing battle reports in his secure bunker when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, but he was no longer alone. 3 human soldiers stood around his desk like shadows come to life. They didn't speak. They didn't make demands. They simply reached for him with gloved hands. The security camera recorded his terrified screams as they dragged him into the darkness. By morning, he had vanished completely. The only trace left behind was a message burned into his desk. "For the children of New Seoul." This became the pattern across Valkyrie space. Military leaders would disappear in the night, leaving behind only recordings of their final moments. The effect on Valkyrie morale was devastating. Soldiers who had once been brave began jumping at shadows, afraid that the next darkness might hide human hunters. Lieutenant Song Haeun's psychological warfare campaigns were equally effective. She had studied Valkyrie culture and knew exactly how to break their minds. The Valkyrie prized strength above all else. They believed that showing fear was the greatest weakness. So Song designed broadcasts that forced them to confront their own terror. She hijacked Valkyrie communication networks and flooded them with images of the murdered human children, accompanied by countdown timers. The message was simple and mathematically precise. 200 children died. 200 Valkyrie worlds will pay. Current count, 67. Remaining, 133. But the most effective part of her campaign was the silence. Between the images and countdowns, Song inserted recordings of the final moments from New Seoul Station. The sounds of children crying for help, the voice of little Lee Dong-yun calling for his sister on Mars. Valkyrie soldiers would hear these sounds in their dreams. Their own commanders reported increasing rates of mental breakdown among the troops. Warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds were being driven insane by the voices of dead human children. Tech specialist John Woo-jin's AI systems had learned to predict Valkyrie tactical responses with impossible accuracy. The artificial intelligences had analyzed thousands of hours of Valkyrie combat recordings and could now anticipate their enemies' moves days in advance. Human fleets began appearing at Valkyrie positions before the alien commanders had even finished making their plans. It was as if humanity could read their thoughts. How is this possible? War Master Thakran demanded during a war council meeting. How do they know what we're going to do before we do it? His chief intelligence officer looked exhausted. Sir, we think they've developed some kind of predictive warfare system. Our patterns, our responses, everything we do. They've mapped it all. The truth was even more terrifying than the Valkyrie suspected. John's AI systems hadn't just learned to predict their tactics, they had learned to manipulate them. The humans were feeding false intelligence to Valkyrie scouts, making them think certain positions were safe when they were actually traps. Entire Valkyrie fleets would arrive at what they thought were strategic locations, only to find human forces already waiting for them. The battles were over before they began. Captain Seo Jabum led the Orphan Squadron with mechanical precision. His fighter bore the name Lee Dong-yun's Vengeance in Korean characters. Along its hull, his wingmen flew ships named after other children from the orphanage. Park Yuna's Fury, Kim Min-ho's Wrath, Remember New Soul. Seo fought with a cold efficiency that terrified even veteran pilots. He never spoke during combat except to give tactical instructions. He never celebrated victories. He simply moved from target to target, erasing Valkyrie ships from existence with surgical precision. His squadron had destroyed over 300 enemy vessels without losing a single pilot. They had become legends in the human fleet and nightmares in Valkyrie space. The most disturbing aspect of the human campaign was its systematic nature. This wasn't the chaotic violence of an angry mob. This was organized, calculated destruction carried out with scientific precision. Professor Oh Kyung-soo had spent months studying Valkyrie culture, identifying exactly what motivated their society. His reports guided every aspect of the human response. The Valkyrie valued strength and feared being forgotten. So the humans didn't just destroy their military installations, they erased them so completely that no trace remained. They didn't just defeat Valkyrie armies, they made it impossible for future generations to remember they had ever existed. Every Valkyrie monument was replaced with memorials to human children. Every historical site became a testament to New Seoul Station. The aliens watched helplessly as their entire cultural heritage was systematically overwritten. Master Sergeant Park Soo-hyun led ground assault teams that demonstrated humanity's new philosophy of warfare. Her Marines didn't fight Valkyrie soldiers. They ignored them completely. Human infantry would walk through active battlefields protected by energy shields that made them untouchable. Valkyrie weapons bounced off them harmlessly. When enemy soldiers tried to attack, the humans would simply continue their mission as if nothing had happened. The psychological impact was devastating. Valkyrie warriors found themselves completely unable to affect their enemies. They could not hurt them, could not slow them down, could not even force them to acknowledge their existence. It was as if the humans had moved beyond normal warfare into something incomprehensible. They fought like forces of nature, unstoppable, inevitable, and completely indifferent to Valkyrie resistance. Engineer Hong Min-soo's construction teams followed behind the military forces, immediately beginning to transform conquered Valkyrie worlds. Within days of occupation, human colony ships would arrive and begin setting up new settlements. The speed of the transformation was terrifying. Valkyrie military bases became human schools. Weapons factories were converted into research centers. Former Valkyrie cities were rebuilt according to human architectural standards. Most disturbing of all, human children could be seen playing in former Valkyrie parks within weeks of conquest. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just conquering. Valkyrie space. They were replacing Valkyrie civilization entirely. Ambassador Yu Jinwoo opened communication channels with the Valkyrie High Command every few weeks, but not to negotiate. He was there to deliver updates. This is Ambassador Yu of the Earth Federation. Current count of liberated worlds, 89. Children avenged, 89 of 200. Estimated time to completion, 14 months. This has been a public service announcement. The calls always ended the same way, with Valkyrie leaders begging for mercy and Yu's calm response. Mercy is for those who show mercy to children. The galaxy watched humanity's campaign with growing horror. Other alien empires began quietly reviewing their own policies toward human civilians. Some sent diplomatic messages expressing their shock at the Valkyrie attack and their support for human retaliation. But there was also fear. If humans could do this to the Valkyrie Empire, one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, what could they do to anyone else who crossed them? The hegemony of Krell, previously humanity's greatest rival, sent an urgent message to Earth. We want to be friends. Similar messages arrived from dozens of other alien governments. 1 year after the New Sol Station massacre, Admiral Choi Yun-bin's siege fleet surrounded the Valkyrie homeworld. Behind her stretched the largest military force humanity had ever assembled, over 800 ships carrying weapons that could crack planets. But the fleet didn't attack. Instead, they demonstrated something far more terrifying than raw destruction. Begin atmospheric conversion of the agricultural worlds, Choi ordered. Dr. Lim's teams deployed devices that looked like simple metal spheres. They fell through the atmospheres of 3 Valkyrie farming planets and activated simultaneously. Within hours, the alien air began to change. The process was beautiful and horrible to watch. Valkyrie plants withered and died as Earth-compatible atmosphere spread across the continents. Human-suitable gravity generators activated, making the worlds perfect for human colonization. Within 3 days, what had been alien farmland became Earth-like paradise. The message was unmistakable. Humanity didn't just want to defeat the Valkyrie, they wanted to replace them entirely. War Master Thokran watched the transformation from his command ship in orbit around the Valkyrie homeworld. His intelligence officers showed him the reports with shaking hands. Sir, the agricultural worlds are completely transformed. Our people can no longer breathe the air, but humans could live there immediately. Thokran stared at the tactical displays. In all his years of warfare, he had never seen anything like this. The humans weren't just conquering territory. They were rewriting the very nature of Valkyrie space. Professor Oh Kyung-soo's cultural analysis teams had identified the deepest fears of Valkyrie society, being forgotten and having their strength proven false. The humans systematically targeted both. They didn't just destroy Valkyrie monuments, they built human memorials in their place. Every Valkyrie historical site became a garden dedicated to the children of New Sol Station. Alien heroes were erased from history and replaced with the names and faces of murdered human orphans. Master Sergeant Park Soo-hyun led the ground operations that demonstrated humanity's ultimate psychological weapon, complete indifference to Valkyrie military power. Her Marines walked through battlefields as if they were strolling through parks. Their energy shields made them untouchable. When Valkyrie soldiers fired at them, the weapons simply bounced off harmlessly. The humans didn't even bother to fire back. They would complete their objectives, securing strategic locations, rescuing human prisoners, establishing forward bases, while completely ignoring enemy resistance. It was as if the Valkyrie military simply didn't exist. The psychological impact was devastating. Valkyrie warriors, who had built their entire identity around strength and martial prowess, found themselves unable to even inconvenience their enemies. They couldn't hurt them, couldn't slow them down, couldn't force them to acknowledge their existence. Some Valkyrie soldiers simply stopped fighting and stood watching in confused terror as humans went about their business around them. Others suffered complete mental breakdowns, unable to process their own irrelevance. Ambassador Yu Jinwoo opened a direct communication channel to the Valkyrie High Command. His message was broadcast to every Valkyrie world simultaneously. This is Ambassador Yu of the Earth Federation. You killed 200 of our children. We promised consequences for each one. Current count, 150 worlds taken. You have 50 worlds remaining. Choose carefully how you spend them. The Valkyrie leadership tried to respond, but Yu continued without pause. We are not here to negotiate. We are not here to make deals. We are here to demonstrate what happens when you harm human children. Your species chose this path when you murdered innocents for sport. The transmission cut off, leaving the Valkyrie leaders staring at blank screens. The most terrifying realization came from Valkyrie intelligence reports. Human colony ships were following immediately behind the military fleets. Within weeks of conquest, human families were living in former Valkyrie cities. Human children were playing in former Valkyrie parks. Engineer Hong Min-soo's reconstruction teams worked with impossible speed. They would arrive at newly captured worlds and begin immediate transformation. Valkyrie military installations became human schools. Weapons factories were converted into research centers. Alien residential areas were rebuilt according to human architectural standards. The speed of the transformation defied comprehension. What should have taken decades of terraforming and construction was happening in weeks. The humans had developed industrial technologies that made large-scale planetary reconstruction as simple as assembling furniture. Captain Seo Jae-boom's Orphan Squadron had become legend throughout human space and nightmare throughout Valkyrie territory. His fighter Lee Dong-hyun's vengeance led formations that could destroy entire fleets without taking damage. But Seo fought with mechanical precision rather than passion. He had transcended anger and moved into something colder. Absolute purpose. He didn't celebrate victories or mourn losses. He simply moved from target to target, erasing Valkyrie resistance with surgical efficiency. His pilots followed his example. They flew ships named after the murdered children and fought with the same cold determination. The Orphan Squadron had become humanity's spear point, and no Valkyrie force could stand against them. The breaking point came when human forces reached the Valkyrie core systems. These were the oldest and most heavily defended worlds in the Empire. The aliens had spent centuries fortifying them against any possible attack. The humans ignored the fortifications completely. Dr. Lim's dissolution weapons removed entire defensive installations from existence. Colonel Bay's special forces made the commanding officers disappear in the night. Tech specialist John's AI systems predicted every defensive maneuver before it was attempted. Within a month, the core systems fell, one by one. Each conquest followed the same pattern: overwhelming human technological superiority, complete disregard for Valkyrie resistance, and immediate transformation into human-compatible worlds. The Valkyrie Empire, which had controlled 300 star systems for over 1,000 years, was reduced to its final 50 worlds in just 18 months. Director Nam Yuna arrived with the colonial integration teams to study captured Valkyrie populations. Her reports revealed something unexpected. Most Valkyrie civilians were actually relieved by human occupation. Valkyrie society had been built on fear and violence. Citizens lived in constant terror of their own military leaders. Children were taken from their families at young ages to be trained as soldiers. Creative expression was forbidden. Individual thought was punished. Under human administration, Valkyrie, civilians experienced freedom for the first time in their lives. Human schools taught Valkyrie children about art, literature, and science instead of warfare. Human medical teams provided healthcare that had been reserved only for military personnel under the old regime. Dr. Shin Ji-yeon's xenopsychology studies revealed that Valkyrie society had been a prison for its own people. The military culture that humans found so abhorrent was equally hated by most Valkyrie civilians. They had simply never known there was an alternative. When given the choice between the old system and human integration, 60% of captured Valkyrie populations chose to remain under human protection. This created a new problem for the Valkyrie: leadership. They were not just losing territory to human conquest, they were losing their own people to human values. War Master Thakran received reports of mass defections from civilian populations. Entire cities were surrendering without a fight and requesting human protection from their own military forces. They're turning our people against us, his advisors reported. The civilians prefer human occupation to our protection. Thakran understood what was happening. The humans hadn't just defeated the Valkyrie military, they had demonstrated that human civilization was superior to Valkyrie civilization. They had proven that strength through compassion was more powerful than strength through fear. The final stroke came when the humans made their ultimate offer. President Han Ji-woo addressed the remaining Valkyrie worlds directly, her words broadcast on every communication channel in the Empire. People of the Valkyrie Empire, you are not our enemies. Your leaders who ordered the murder of children are our enemies. We offer you 3 choices. The first choice was exile. Any Valkyrie who wished to leave human space would be provided with ships and supplies to start over in the Galactic Rim, far from any human contact. The second choice was integration. Valkyrie who wished to join human society would be given homes, education, and full citizenship rights. Their children would grow up learning human values of compassion and cooperation, instead of violence and domination. The third choice was justice. Valkyrie military leaders who had participated in war crimes could stand trial for their actions. Those who showed genuine remorse and willingness to change might be eligible for rehabilitation programs. We do not hate your species, President Han continued. We hate what your leaders made you become. We offer you the chance to become something better. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the remaining Valkyrie worlds, civilians began contacting human forces to request integration or exile. Military units began surrendering en masse. War Master Thakran sat alone in his command chamber, watching his empire collapse not through military defeat, but through moral revolution. 2 years after the New Sol Station massacre, the war ended not with a battle, but with a choice that would reshape the galaxy forever. War Master Thakran stood before the communication array in his command ship, knowing these would be the last words he spoke as leader of the Valkyrie Empire. Around him, his remaining officers waited in silence. Outside, the final 50 Valkyrie worlds prepared for whatever came next. President Han of Earth, he began, his voice carrying the weight of defeat and something else. Understanding. We were wrong. We thought humans were weak because you protect your young. We understand now that you are terrifying because you protect your young. The transmission reached Earth within hours. President Han listened to the complete surrender of the most powerful military empire in the galaxy, but she felt no satisfaction. Too many children had died for this moment to bring joy. We surrender unconditionally. Thakran continued. We place ourselves at your mercy. We ask only that you remember, we are not all monsters. Many of our people never wanted this war. President, Han's response was broadcast to every corner of the galaxy. Her words would become the foundation of a new galactic order. War Master Thakran, your surrender is accepted, but mercy must be earned, not given. Your empire chose to murder children. Now your people must choose what they wish to become. She paused, looking directly into the camera that would carry her image to billions of watching aliens. To all Valkyrie, people, civilian and military, you have 3 paths before you. Choose wisely, for this choice will determine your species' future. The first path was exile. Any Valkyrie who could not accept human values would be given ships and supplies to start new lives in the distant galactic rim. They would be provided with everything needed to build peaceful colonies, but they would never be allowed to return to human space. The second path was integration. Valkyrie who genuinely wished to join human civilization would be welcomed as full citizens. They would receive education in human values, homes on integrated worlds, and the chance for their children to grow up in a society built on compassion rather than conquest. The third path was justice. Military leaders who had participated in war crimes would face trial. Those who showed genuine remorse and willingness to change might be eligible for rehabilitation. Those who did not would face the full consequences of their actions. We do not seek revenge, President Han concluded. We seek to ensure that no children, human or alien, ever again suffer what happened at New Sol Station. The response was immediate and stunning. Across the 50 remaining Valkyrie worlds, the choice was overwhelmingly clear. 80% of the Valkyrie civilian population chose integration. They had lived under military rule for so long that the chance for freedom was irresistible. Within weeks, massive population transfers began as Valkyrie families moved to human-administered worlds. 15% chose exile. These were mostly hardline military supporters who could never accept human values. They departed for the Rim territories with basic supplies and a promise never to return. The remaining 5% were military personnel who chose to face justice. Some did so out of genuine remorse, others simply because they had nowhere else to go. Dr. Shin Ji-yeon's integration programs became the model for transforming militant societies. Her teams worked with Valkyrie families to help them understand concepts that had been forbidden under the old regime: individual choice, artistic expression, the value of life over strength. The transformation was remarkable. Valkyrie children who had been trained as warriors began attending human schools and learning about literature, science, and art. Many showed natural talents that had been suppressed under the military system. Director Nam Yuna oversaw the reconstruction of former Valkyrie worlds. The process was unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of simply conquering territory, humanity was transforming entire civilizations. Valkyrie military academies became universities. Weapons factories were converted into research centers focusing on medical technology and space exploration. Former parade grounds where soldiers had marched became parks where children of all species played together. Engineer Hong Min-soo's teams worked with impossible efficiency. Within 6 months, former Valkyrie worlds were indistinguishable from human colonies. But these weren't human-only settlements. They were integrated communities where former enemies lived side by side. The crown jewel of the reconstruction was the new capital city built on the Valkyrie homeworld. At its center stood the Memorial Garden of New Seoul, 200 trees, one for each murdered child. Each tree bore a plaque with a child's name, age, and dreams they would never fulfill. But surrounding the memorial were schools, hospitals, research centers, and homes where Valkyrie and human families lived as neighbors. The message was powerful. From the greatest tragedy had come the greatest hope. Commander Park Ji-ho, the sole survivor of New Seoul Station's command staff, was chosen to lead the memorial's dedication ceremony. He had spent 2 years in rehabilitation, recovering from the trauma of watching 200 children die under his protection. Standing before the gathered crowd of humans and Valkyrie, Park's voice was steady, but filled with emotion. This place stands as a reminder of what we lost, but also of what we found. We learned that humanity's greatest strength is not our weapons or our technology. It is our refusal to let evil triumph over innocence. He paused, looking at the mixed crowd of species. The children who died here taught the galaxy something important. They showed us that some things are worth any sacrifice to protect. They showed us that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. The ceremony concluded with something unprecedented in galactic history: a joint choir of human and Valkyrie children singing together. The song was simple, performed in both languages, but its message echoed across the stars. We remember the past, but we choose the future. The transformation of Valkyrie society sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Other alien empires watched in amazement as humanity's former enemies became their closest allies. The hegemony of Krell sent urgent diplomatic missions to Earth. Their message was consistent: we want to be friends. Similar communications arrived from dozens of other alien governments, but the real change was in how alien civilizations treated their own populations. Reports reached Earth of improved conditions for civilians across multiple star systems. Alien governments were suddenly very concerned about being seen as humane and peaceful. Captain Seo Jabum, hero of the Orphan Squadron, was offered promotion to Admiral. He declined, choosing instead to become an instructor at the new integrated military academy on the former Valkyrie homeworld. I want to teach both human and Valkyrie students, he explained. I want them to understand that strength comes from protecting others, not from conquering them. His students would include both species, learning side by side about honor, duty, and the responsibility that came with power. The trials of Valkyrie war criminals became a model for transitional justice. Those who showed genuine remorse and worked to repair the damage they had caused were given opportunities for rehabilitation. Those who remained unrepentant faced life imprisonment on remote worlds. Warmaster Thokran chose the path of justice. His trial lasted 6 months and was broadcast across the galaxy. He testified honestly about his actions and their consequences, showing remorse that his own officers said was genuine. His sentence was unprecedented. Life service in human colonial administration, working to build the peaceful communities that could have prevented the war. He would spend his remaining years helping to establish integrated colonies, where former enemies could learn to live as neighbors. The galaxy's power structure shifted permanently. Humanity was no longer seen as a peaceful but weak species. They were recognized as the most dangerous civilization in known space, dangerous precisely because they fought for principles rather than territory. Admiral Yang, now Supreme Fleet Commander, established the new doctrine that would govern human military policy for generations. We will not seek conflict, but we will not avoid it when innocent lives are at stake. We will show mercy to those who show mercy. We will offer peace to those who choose peace. But we will never again allow the defenseless to be harmed without response. The doctrine was backed by the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen, but more importantly, it was backed by demonstrated will to use that force when necessary. Tech specialist Gion's AI systems were retrained for peaceful purposes, helping to predict and prevent conflicts before they could escalate. The same technology that had won the war was now being used to preserve the peace. Dr. Lim's weapons research was redirected toward defensive systems and terraforming technology. The quantum dissolution devices that had erased Valkyrie fortresses were adapted to remove asteroids and create new worlds for expanding populations. The final chapter of the transformation came with the establishment of the Galactic Children's Protection Treaty. Every known alien civilization signed the agreement, which established simple but absolute principles. The deliberate targeting of children or non-combatants was a crime against all sapient life. Any civilization that violated this principle would face immediate intervention by the combined forces of the treaty signers. There would be no exceptions, no negotiations, no mercy for child killers.